Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. 21-year-old Chris Kremers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon arrived in Panama on March 15, 2014. The two friends were recent university graduates who had grown up in Amersfoort in the Netherlands and had spent 6 months saving up and planning their trip, where they hoped to learn Spanish, volunteer with children, and help out local communities. They spent 2 weeks touring Panama before arriving in the mountain town of Boquete on March 29th, where they would be staying with a local family and spending time with the town's children. But it was here that the pair's trip took a dark turn. On the morning of April 1st at around 11 a.m., the pair went hiking in the forests surrounding the Baru volcano. For hours, they journeyed through the wilderness, but later that night, Lisanne's parents stopped receiving text messages from her. The two friends had been keeping their families updated on a daily basis, so the abrupt silence was concerning to loved ones. The following morning, the pair missed an appointment they had with a local guide, at which time their host family grew alarmed and they contacted the authorities. Days later, on April 6th, their parents flew into Panama, bringing with them some Dutch detectives who worked with local investigators to conduct an extensive search of the forest where they had gone hiking. The search lasted for over a week and ended with their parents offering a reward of $30,000 for information leading to their whereabouts. But the money went unclaimed. There was no trace of either Lisanne or Chris during the 10-day search. Their families began to fear the worst. The first piece of evidence in the case emerged over 2 months later, on June 14th, when a local woman turned in Lisanne's backpack. It had been located close to a riverbank near her village of Alto Romero. The bag contained 2 pairs of sunglasses, $83 in cash, Lisanne's insurance card, a water bottle, her digital camera, 2 bras, and both women's phones, which were in good working condition. Their call records showed that 6 hours after they set off on the morning of April 1st, someone using Chris's phone dialed emergency services. Another call came 10 minutes later at 4:51 p.m. from Lisanne's phone. However, neither call went through due to poor phone reception. Lisanne's phone battery finally gave out several days later, on April 4th, and the device was never used again. Chris's phone did not make further calls either, but it was turned on several times in what authorities believe was a search for a signal. It was turned on for the last time on April 11th at 10:51 a.m. It stayed on for about an hour and was turned off at 11:56 a.m. Some reports state that of the 77 calls made, only 1 connected, and it broke up after just a few seconds. Lisanne's Canon camera is perhaps the most eerie piece of evidence recovered in the case, showing their last days in the jungle. Images from April 1st indicated that they'd taken a trail at the overlook of the Continental Divide and then wandered into the wilderness. Further photos taken on April 8th showed that they were deep in the jungle, in darkness. The captured images had timestamps of between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., and the camera's flash was used. Some pictures suggested that they were near a body of water, likely a river or ravine, while others displayed mundane images such as a twig and plastic bags on top of a rock, a backpack strap, and the back of Chris's head. Some have theorized they were using the flash to light the area, scare off animals, or perhaps even to try and attract attention. After Lisanne's backpack was recovered, a search was conducted in the area where it was found, in the hopes of finally finding the 2 women. Initially, Chris's denim shorts were the only thing located, atop a rock on the opposite bank of the stream, a few kilometers from where the backpack had been seen. Another 8 weeks passed, however, before the remains of Chris and Lisanne were found. A pelvis, as well as a boot containing a human foot, were the first body parts to be recovered, but another 33 widely scattered bones were discovered a short time later. DNA revealed that they belonged to Lisanne and Chris. Chris's bones appeared to have been bleached, probably due to sun exposure, while only 10% of Lisanne's body was recovered, and 5% of Chris's. Given the wild vegetation in the area and the presence of wild animals, this doesn't seem particularly unusual. Due to the state of the remains and the general lack of them, A cause of death has never been established, but the prevailing theory is that the young women got lost and disoriented, or possibly injured, leading to their deaths. Though there is little mystery here, the photographs that they left behind in the days leading up to their disappearances and deaths are chilling nonetheless. Susan Powell. 25-year-old Joshua Powell met 18-year-old Susan Cox during a dinner party at his Tacoma, Washington apartment in November 2000. The pair were classmates at an LDS Church Institute of Religion course, and they began dating a short time after the get-together. As both were members of the church, it wasn't long before they married. In April 2001, less than 6 months later, they tied the knot at the Portland, Oregon temple. In the following weeks, the couple moved in temporarily with Joshua's father, Stephen. The older man reportedly became infatuated with his daughter-in-law and was known to follow Susan around the house with a camcorder, spy on her when she was in the bathroom, steal her underwear, and even read her journals. He also posted love poems about her online under a pseudonym. 2 years after she and Powell married, his father confessed his feelings for her. Susan rejected him. A short time later, the couple relocated from Washington to West Valley City, Utah, a suburb of Salt Lake City, where their 2 children were born. Charles, the oldest, in 2005, and his younger brother, Braden, in 2007. Although Susan had hoped that life would be smoother with a bit of distance between her and Stephen, it didn't take long before cracks in her relationship with Powell began to show. Her journal entries noted that the couple struggled for a number of reasons, including that Powell was extremely controlling, spent more money than they earned, and he continued to maintain a relationship with his father, despite how inappropriately he had acted towards Susan. In 2007, Powell filed for bankruptcy, declaring over $200,000 in debt. In the summer of 2008, about 18 months before she vanished, Susan recorded a video discussing how she was trying to protect her assets. She was advised by a lawyer to document expensive possessions inside the home, and begins the video by stating,
covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family or all of us, that our assets are documented. Hope everything works out and we're all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible.
Around this time, she also wrote a will that her husband did not know about, in which she stated, "I want it documented that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage, and if I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." Susan was last seen by a friend at around 5 p.m. on December 6, 2009 at her home. The next day, the entire family was reported missing as they could not be contacted. Powell's mother and estranged sister, Jennifer, went to the house to look for them after learning that neither Braden nor Charlie had been dropped off at daycare that morning as scheduled. However, when nobody answered the door, the police were called. The responding officers broke into the home and noticed something odd. 2 fans were blowing at a damp spot on the sofa, but there was no sign of the family. Notably, it didn't seem like Susan had left of her own accord, as her handbag, money, and ID had been left behind inside the home. Her mobile phone was discovered inside the couple's shared vehicle. Powell returned home with the children later that day, at around 5 p.m., and was immediately taken to the police station for questioning. He claimed that when he last saw Susan, she was sleeping. This was on the night of December 6th. He alleged that he took the boys on a camping trip that night, but police found this suspicious, in part due to the freezing cold conditions that occurred on the night of their supposed trip, and also because the children were due in daycare the following morning. On December 8th, Powell rented a car at the Salt Lake City International Airport, and for the next 18 hours, his whereabouts are unknown. Investigators later discovered that the car had recorded over 800 miles during the time he had possession of the vehicle. Suspicious investigators returned to the family home on December 9th, where traces of Susan's blood were discovered on the floor. Authorities also found several important documents, including a life insurance policy that Powell had taken out on Susan, totaling $1.5 million, and a handwritten letter the 28-year-old mother of two had left behind, in which she expressed how she feared for her life. During the course of their investigation, the police also made several other discoveries, although these were not made public until 2012. They observed that Powell liquidated Susan's retirement funds after she went missing, cancelled her chiropractic sessions, and took the children out of daycare. They also found out through his colleagues that he had spoken before about hiding a body in an abandoned mine shaft in the desert. Notably, just weeks after Susan vanished, one of Charlie's teachers reported that the little boy had stated that his mother was dead. Eerily still, Susan's parents learned that while at daycare, Braden had drawn a picture of a van with 3 people inside it and told his carers, "Mommy was in the trunk." When approached by investigators, Charlie told them that the children had indeed gone on a camping trip, but that Susan had gone with them and never returned. By this time, Powell had stopped cooperating with investigators, and in December 2009, he was labeled a person of interest in the case. That same month, he took the children to his father's home to spend time with him over the holidays. In January 2010, he and his brother Michael returned to pack up the family home, as he planned to relocate to the same town as their father. There, Powell shared a home with the 2 boys, as well as Stephen, Michael, and 2 of his other siblings, John and Alina. Around this time, a website about Susan's disappearance sprang up on the internet, claiming that Powell was a victim of a smear campaign set up by his in-laws, estranged sister, and the LDS Church. The website is believed to have been set up by the Powell family, and the posts were written by Powell and Stephen. Both men claimed the following year that Susan had abandoned the family due to mental health problems and run off with another man. In 2010, investigators kept an eye on Powell, but also began examining Stephen's background. According to his ex-wife, Powell's mother, the family was very dysfunctional. Stephen regularly showed the boys pornography, and he would decline to limit their wild behavior. Powell was a particularly destructive youth, having once attempted to take his own life, once threatened his mother with a knife, and killed more than one pet gerbil. Authorities also learned at this time of Stephen's obsession with Susan, which came to their attention via a family friend. His computer was seized that year, showing he had around 4,500 images of Susan that had been taken without her consent, including close-ups of her body. In September, he was arrested on charges of child pornography and voyeurism after it was found he had been secretly videotaping young girls and women, including Susan. Susan's parents filed for and were granted temporary custody of her children following this incident. Around this time, Michael was also deemed to be suspicious by the police when they discovered that his car had been sold to a junkyard a short time after Susan went missing. Police were able to retrieve the vehicle, and a cadaver dog indicated that human remains had been contained within it. However, DNA testing was inconclusive. Michael continued to harass Susan's family by setting up web pages that accused them of abusing and neglecting Braden and Charlie, and made allegations that the police were mishandling the missing persons case. The Cox family were able to have the sites taken down by Google, which considered them a violation of its terms of use. On February 5, 2012, Charlie, Braden, and Powell perished in an explosion at Powell's house, a separate property he had acquired after being told that he'd have to move out of his father's home in order to regain custody of his children. That day, the boys were visiting Powell as part of a supervised visit with a social worker when he grabbed the pair and locked them, as well as himself, into the bathroom. Authorities immediately treated the case as a murder-suicide, and evidence soon proved that the deaths had been pre-planned by Powell. A hatchet had been found near his body, and injuries to the heads and necks of Charlie and Braden indicated that he had hit them with the weapon, although the cause of death for all 3 was listed as carbon monoxide poisoning. Petrol had been decanted through the house, and several 5-gallon petrol containers were recovered from the property in the aftermath of the explosion. 1 year later, on February 11, 2013, Michael took his own life by jumping from the roof of a parking garage. Authorities believe that he knew about and likely helped with Susan's murder. Since both men were now dead, and Stephen was in prison after being convicted of CP and voyeurism charges, The active investigation into Susan's case was shelved. Stephen was released in 2017 after spending 6 years behind bars. He died of heart problems 1 year later. In 2022, remains were discovered inside a mine shaft in the Utah desert, but they were found to be animal bones. Scraps of clothing found nearby, however, tested positive for male DNA, though the DNA is still unidentified. Susan's body has never been found, but the chilling video of her predicting what fate had in store for her and her children continues to haunt those who knew her. Patricia Meehan. At the time of her disappearance, Patricia Meehan was 37 years old and living in Bozeman, Montana, where she worked as a ranch hand and took on odd jobs to support herself. She'd grown up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and studied early childhood development in Oklahoma City, but abruptly changed careers and locations in 1985, citing her love for animals as a reason for the switch. She was last seen before her disappearance by her landlord, who observed that she seemed hyper at the time. On April 19th, 1989, Patricia spoke with her father over the phone. She told him that she was under stress and wanted to come home. Her mother later stated Patricia was suffering from a depressive episode around this time. Her family noted that she'd become down and withdrawn in the months before she vanished, and this might have been because she believed she had missed her window to have children, something she really wanted in life. The phone call to her father was the last time that her loved ones heard from her. The next day, at around 8:15 p.m., a woman named Peggy Bueller and her father were traveling west on Montana Highway 200 near Circle, Montana, when they saw a car going in the opposite direction, on the wrong side of the road. Peggy, who was driving, swerved to avoid a collision, but the car driving east hit the vehicle behind her, which was being driven by a woman named Carol Heights. Fortunately, Carol wasn't injured in the crash, and as she climbed out of her car, she spotted a woman emerging from the east driving vehicle. It was Patricia Meehan. Carol recalled that the 37-year-old approached her and stared as if she was looking right through her. She didn't say a word. Carol remembered, quote, "She just stared. She never said anything. She just stared at me. I will never forget her." Peggy Bueller, meanwhile, observed the interaction, or lack thereof, from her car on the shoulder of the road. Patricia subsequently climbed over a fence and stood motionless for a long moment. Peggy later explained, "As I looked across the accident, I noticed someone on the other side of the fence. She was standing there like a spectator, not like it had happened to her." Patricia continued to stand motionless in silence for another few moments before she turned and walked into the empty field, disappearing in the dark. When police arrived on the scene a short time later, Patricia was nowhere to be seen and could not be located. Authorities identified her using her car's license plate. During the search in the immediate aftermath of the crash, authorities followed a trail of footprints believed to belong to Patricia based on the size and the fact they were recent. The tracks were followed until 3 a.m. before they disappeared. Investigators opted to halt the search until daylight came. In the following days, Patricia's parents arrived in Montana and helped distribute flyers with her photograph printed on them. Her siblings also came to town to help. The search for the 37-year-old involved volunteers, officers on horseback, investigators on ATVs, and even a helicopter, but no trace of her was found. A thorough examination of disused coal mines in the area revealed no evidence of Patricia. To this day, it's unclear why Patricia was in the area where she vanished from, as the crash site was around 400 miles from home in Bozeman. Although she was due to see a psychologist for her depression on the morning of April 21st, that didn't explain why she was out after 8 p.m. on the night of the 20th, hundreds of miles from her residence. Little evidence was ever found in Patricia's case. The most notable thing recovered was a photo on her camera, which showed an unsmiling selfie of the 37-year-old taken in the mirror. Though some believe it's a rather eerie, emotionless shot, others see it as a plain, ordinary image. It has been widely circulated online in recent years. Though there isn't much concrete evidence to indicate what became of Patricia, there have been thousands of sightings in the years since she walked away from the car crash. Between 1989 and 1991, alleged sightings sprang up in just about every state, including Alaska and Hawaii. A police officer in Minnesota believed he'd seen her at a booth in a Hardee's restaurant. She was alone and stayed until closing before walking to the nearby 24/7 diner. When questioned by the officer, she refused to give her name and gave mixed statements about where she was from, claiming to be a Colorado native at one point and then an Israeli national at another. 2 other sightings were reported the following day, one in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and another in Murdo, South Dakota, 12 hours later. In May, a waitress reported seeing Patricia in Bozeman, Montana, where she lived at the time of the accident. Quote, "Patty came in the door and wanted to be sat quickly and served quickly. She told me, 'I'm in a hurry,' and I said, 'Well, we do breakfast in 10 minutes, you'll be out very quickly.' And then I said to her, 'You must have to be at work at 9. It was about 8:30. She said, 'No, I'm just going shopping.' I couldn't understand why it was so important for her to be there right at 9 o'clock to go shopping. She was in such a huge hurry." The waitress added that the 37-year-old seemed very disoriented and spacey. She noticed her talking to herself and stated that she mostly looked out of the window and watched people go past while seated at the restaurant. By June 1989, over 25 sightings were reported to the police. 3 of them were confirmed by investigators. In 1990, a woman was apprehended in Idaho for littering, and the arresting officer thought that she looked uncannily like Patricia. However, fingerprinting later revealed that they were not the same person. Investigators suspect that Patricia left the area where the crash happened, either by stowing away on a hay truck that was seen around half a mile from the crash scene, or she caught a lift with a stranger. Psychologist Don LaPlante spoke with Unsolved Mysteries, which aired an episode about her case in November of 1989, and concluded, "It appears that Patricia was experiencing a very difficult time in her life and was involved in a rather dramatic accident, which may have involved a head injury. The combination of these factors may have caused amnesia. She does not know who she is, has lost memories of the past, and is out searching for herself throughout the country." Police and Patricia's loved ones also believe that she may be suffering from amnesia, and foul play is not suspected in her case. It's possible she is still alive but has no memory of who she is or her life before the crash. In 2011, a composite image of a woman located in British Columbia was made public, and several armchair detectives thought it resembled Patricia. However, police investigated the tip and ruled her out of the case. Patricia Meehan is still missing. She was 37 when she vanished from Circle, Montana on April 20th, 1989. She is described as a white woman with blonde hair, grey-green eyes, and freckles. She is 5 foot 3 inches tall and weighed between 110 to 117 pounds when she went missing. Family members note that she speaks very softly and uses the nickname Patty. When she was last seen, she was wearing a brown coat, jeans, and high-top trainers. If she is still alive, she will be 73 years old. Anyone with information in Patty's case can contact the Macomb County Sheriff's Office at 406-485-3405.